Not every coyote is a bad coyote. You're absolutely right. There are issues associated with them, and there are times when management is necessary, but it's not all the time. Just because you see a coyote doesn't mean it's causing you problems. And that's an important thing to identify because coyotes are a territorial animal. And so if you have a pair on your property that are just there, they're fulfilling their role, they are an important native animal, they have an important role in the environment. If they're doing their thing, great. Let them do their thing. Now, again, my realm of expertise is human-wildlife conflict. So absolutely there are times when coyotes go out of the realm of their job that we would call, and they start moving into animals that are of importance to humans, whether it's emotional importance, we talk about pets, financial importance, whether it's livestock or even ungulates, both native and exotic. We're talking about our deer fawns. There are a lot of areas where you start to see conflict. So when we talk about that sort of management, it's wildlife damage management plan. And that's an important, the wildlife damage is an important specification because they're not a pest. A couple of steps before we start taking action. So one is monitoring. And in your scenario, you already had some monitoring in place. You were observing your fawn crop, you're keeping track of it, you have game cameras. Great first step. Another thing that managers need to decide is how much damage they can tolerate. Because any sort of management, it's an investment, whether you're investing in time, your resources, your finances. And so you want to decide where that line is where you need to take action. And then if you do make it to that point, if you have carcasses available, you can do sort of your own CSI to make sure that you're targeting the right issue. We see this with wildlife, but also with livestock. You want to make sure that predation is actually what's taking those animals off the landscape. If there's some sort of health issue, you would want to address that differently. So if you've checked all those boxes, you know it's a coyote on your property causing the damage, yes, there are some actions that you can take. If it's coyotes, you can set up snares on your property. That's an option. You can look at deterrent options. A lot of times we see that more effective with livestock because you're able to control them a little bit more than you are with game management. But depending on your approach to what's on your property, livestock guardian dogs are a great option as well. And there are a list of toxicants or pesticides, chemical options available for managing coyotes specifically too. So typically in that, if a landowner would ask me what's the best tool available, what I would do is I would talk about the tools that are available and let them make the decision on what fits best. And so, if we were talking about a coyote issue, we've got snares, we've got leg hold traps. If it's related to livestock, we've got a lot of preventative measures we could take to kind of help prevent the damage before it even starts to happen. And then there is lethal control methods. There's shooting them, and like we discussed, there are a couple of chemical control options available. In Texas, there are 2 chemical options available for coyote management. One is the Livestock Guardian Collar, and one is an M44 device. So the Livestock Guardian Collar, one thing that's really popular about it is that it is one of the most specific options you can get other than shooting a coyote that's actively predating an animal. Because the way they work is it has a chemical called compound 1080. Historically, it was less regulated. Now this is the only way it can be put on the landscape. But essentially, the chemical is put into a collar and then it is put on a livestock animal, a lot of times on a sheep. And so that animal is ultimately sacrificed. What you're looking for to happen is for a coyote to try and predate that animal. They typically go for a neck grab. And so that's where the collar is placed on the sheep. And so when the coyote bites, it punctures the collar and gets the chemical directly in its mouth. So you are only targeting coyotes that are actively trying to consume sheep or goats on your property. To get these species specific, they rely on behaviors. And so a lot of times we look at behaviors that are common in canines. And so what that relies on is a bite and pull behavior. So coyotes, canine animals, will bite an object and pull on it. That's not something you see in other animals. That's not a common behavior we see in game birds or in white-tailed deer or things like that. And so actually on sodium cyanide devices, you can also be even more specific whether you're getting coyotes or foxes by how large you make the device. And so if you put like vet tape around the actual bite structure, it'll be too large for a fox to get a good grip on. But again, if you're targeting coyotes specifically, they could bite it, pull, and then it shoots the chemical directly into their mouth. So also very species specific. So the people who have access to these chemicals are professionals. And when you see people who don't have experience, who are just trying on the weekends, they're not putting in that effort, that's when you see these animals learning and adapting. And so a lot of times when you have someone who has, years of experience with getting these toxicants on the ground or even snares or traps or whatever they're using, when they have this high level of experience, their success is higher and there's less opportunity for learning. I think that's a big difference, because historically there was the ability to go buy these chemicals, poison meat, put it on the landscape, and leave it like that. And yeah, if there's a pile of dead scavengers around a base station, it's not hard to learn that that's not something you want to touch. I feel like with chemical control, there's always some amount of concern, but these options for coyotes that we've discussed so far have been on the market for a while, and they are a lot more specific and regulated than they used to be. So it's not something that I'm hearing concern about right now. So when we talk about livestock management, a lot of the issues are centered around reproduction. The calves, the kids, the lambs, those are going to be the most vulnerable animals. And so when you're working your herd, you're developing your breeding stock, you want to make sure you have cows that are being good mothers. And anybody who's ever worked cows knows the difference between an uninterested mother and a good mother. The good mother is the one that's going to make it really difficult for you to pick up the calf and tag it, vaccinate it. She's not happy about it. She's out there actively protecting her calf. And while that may be annoying from a cattle management perspective, if they're on the landscape, if they're out on the range on their own, that is critical for success in preventing predation. Now, again, I'm in Texas, so I'm thinking about coyote issues. There are definitely bigger predators out there that can take out an entire adult cow. That's a different conversation that I don't have a lot of expertise with. But following down that line of thought can move cattle into a smaller pasture that's easier for you to observe. It provides a little bit more group protection with them. Different kinds of fencing can help prevent coyotes and bobcats from accessing an area. There's options where you can actually put a flag fence around, just like flapping flags in the wind. Something with the noise or the motion of them can help deter predators from an area. There's electric fencing. There's a lot of different options, preventative options available from the livestock aspect. It does take a little bit of investment and work on the front end. But again, when we talk about livestock management in regards to predators, any animal that's taken is a loss. Whereas with game management, you expect some animals to be taken because they're fitting into the environment, into the food chain, into the ecosystem. As hunters, we have an image to protect. And there is already a massive disconnect between the general population and the landscape of natural resources and conservation, because not everybody who is in an urban environment or a suburban environment has the opportunity or the desire to examine that. And so it is absolutely important that as hunters and conservationists, we remember the ethical side and remember the respect of these animals. All you can do with public perception is education, and good education is founded on data. So whether it's for public perception or for management, having information before you make the decision is just absolutely critical. And so if you're concerned about your deer, well, okay, we're going to likely be looking at the reproductive phase. And so we're looking at our fawn crops, and we're looking at that not just when they hit the ground, but around hunting season. What's our doe to fawn ratio when we're looking at yearlings? And if you have that information over time, not just one season, you can see trends. And so you can say, okay, we have a decline going on. There is a need. There is a documented, data-driven need to take action. Whereas if you're finding the opposite, if you're finding, oh my gosh, we have a superabundance of deer, maybe it's important to let the native predators do their job on the landscape. And you have opinions on both sides. It's exactly like you said. There's people who value the deer and they want as many deer on the landscape as possible. So you're educating both groups. You're educating the groups that have strong feelings about predator control, for it or against it, but you're also educating the hunters that may want to induce predator control. But there's an important realization that the habitat can only support so many animals, and hunting is hunting. It's not always successful. You're not going to get the exact quotas you need. And at some point in time, you still want it to be ethical sport. And so if you're having too many deer, letting the predators do their thing isn't a bad compromise. And so it's education on both sides. And you're right, there's going to be polarized opinions that you're never going to sway, but getting good science-driven data out there in a format that people can easily process is critical to getting us all at least close to being on the same page.